Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Nurturing Astrology podcast. I'm Dominique Jaramillo, your astrologer and host. I believe astrology can fast track personal growth, improve lives, and empower parents, and also save relationships, families, and marriages. So, on the Nurturing Astrology podcast, I will offer practical guidance for applying astrology to all of these important areas of life. I'll offer insight from my own work, studies, and life experiences, as well as interview experts to bring you stellar wisdom from other professionals to inspire you on your journey. I'm so glad you're here, and I can't wait to get started. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Nurturing Astrology Podcast. I'm Dominique Jaramillo, your astrologer and host, and I'm here with Cornelia Hansen and another Circle Time chat. Hi, Cornelia.
Hi.
So today we're going to go into the missing element. What you lack, you live out. So we've been discussing this and decided to do a chat because we think it's important, because there's a lot of different perspectives on the expression of a missing element in a natal chart. And there's lots of different ways to work with it. So today we want to dive into this concept a little bit and offer some good insight for everyone, for you to better understand yourself and also to nurture your children and your families and your relationships. So we're going to be speaking from our experience, our personal knowledge and insight, as well as a few different books. So I have obviously Stephen Arroyo's Astrology, Psychology, and the Four Elements. Awesome book. And then Deborah Silverman has a great, some great insight in the missing element. And Cornelia has a great book as well.
It's called Mapping the Psyche by Claire Martin. This is her second volume. She has several volumes, but this is the second one, talks about lack of elements.
Yeah, so we really, really good stuff. We've been kind of bringing in a lot of different perspectives and insights and our own, and we want to kind of dive into a little bit of this concept. So just generally, we'll remind everyone the elements are fire, earth, air, and water. And the elements act as functions of behavior in the astrology chart. So the element of fire is that action, intuitive function. Earth is practicality and the reality function. Air is intellect and our mental function. And then water is our sensitivities, our emotional functions. And this is going to be based on where the planets are in our chart, what signs they're in. So we all have different placements, different signs. So we have various degrees of each element within our own nativity. And to make a note, this is not including the rising sign, because the angles are points. The rising sign is a point. It is not an actual planet. So we would be looking for the rising sign at the ruling planet of the chart. Say Cancer rising, you would look to the moon and what sign the moon was in to understand that where that element comes into play, right? So when there's a lack, there's a sense of deficiency that seeks to be balanced within the chart. And Stephen Arroyo says that if you have at least a little bit of an element, that you are somewhat in tune with that function, right?
Yes, but if you have one planet, it's sort of low. Two can be normal, okay? But if you have one planet, then it's a little bit deficient, okay? But a total lack acts like a total lack.
Okay, so that's what we're going to focus on today, is a total lack. When you're like, oh my gosh, I have no fire, I have no water, I have no earth. What does that mean? And the thing that we want to point out before we dive into it, that we think is the most important thing to remember, if you get nothing else from this chat, right, is that people often mistake the lack as a negative. We want to remove the negativity around this concept of lacking an element, because it actually can be the source of our greatest gifts. Right, Cornelia?
And you'll see that with a lot of the examples that we give. I mean, sometimes a person is overcompensates so much, they become obsessed with this lack. Like you look at Mark Spitz, who won 5 medals for swimming and diving, who has no water in his chart.
Case in point. Exactly. So if nothing else, that's the biggest thing, is that, they can often be looked at as negative, or, if you were saying, if you have no air, that you're not smart, or that you can't learn, or that you have trouble communicating. Right. So these
Right.
are misconceptions, or sort of negative connotations that we want to take out of that conversation, and recognize that there are some things to be aware of, certainly with a lack of an element, and with the awareness that you lack it can make all the difference. And understanding people in your lives, your children or your parents, your partners, where they lack, can really help you understand their dynamic. I have to tell you, when I first learned that my father had no water other than like a north node, and I don't think you even count that because that's a point, right? That's not a planet.
Right.
So no water. And I realized why I had struggled so much to have an emotional connection with him.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I was like, oh, but it freed me from that expectation and allowed me to have information on how I could proceed in having a healthy, good relationship with him, and meet us where we did hit, which was air. He has tons of air. I have lots of air. So we can talk. We can talk for days.
We can talk about feelings. Yeah.
We can talk about things, but the deeper emotional connections are just not as accessible. So you understand that, and then you're free, and you have naturally a better connection. So I found that to be really, really important in relationships, to understand that. So let's dive into some of the ideas and concepts behind a missing element, and then we'll go into some examples with each one, right? So why don't you kick us off with the first one about this, unconscious influence over us?
Right. It has an unconscious influence because it's outside of our ego control, our conscious awareness. So whatever we don't have inside of our birth chart, somehow we have to manifest it in the outside world. We call it compensating for a lack, or overcompensating.
Right.
We have a blind spot about what's not in our chart. Okay, so that manifests itself by sometimes you sit down with a client and you say, well, I noticed you don't have any fire, so you don't have any natural optimism or this or that. And the client gets, what do you mean by that? People say I have a lot of fire. I'm a very fiery person. So we're sensitive about the lack that we have. So if somebody accused me of not being intellectual, I'd say, what are you talking about? So they're very sensitive about this point because they're projecting it. Okay, so that's a good point to understand. Whatever is lacking acts like a complex. Okay, now that sounds like a problem, but it isn't. Okay, it's a complex is something that just acts automatically. It's compulsive. We get obsessed about it. We work hard to compensate for it. So it can become a very driving force. Like, how do you win 5 medals in the Olympics? I mean, that's rather amazing. I don't think anybody's broken his record yet.
Wow.
It's just that driving push to accomplish something in that area. So how do we deal with this lack? We deal with it in different kinds of ways.
Right.
We can deny what we lack by saying, no, I don't lack that. We can insist that we can project it out onto somebody else. We can try to use another function. For instance, I lack air. As a kid, I was very interested in using my fire function because my moon was in Leo. So I was always into whatever performances we were doing, whether we were singing in a choir or whether I was acting in a play or whatever it was, but I was expressing my air through that fire function. Okay. Another way we can is just to totally deny we are not lacking it, but we hate it in other people. We project it out there. I don't like those intellects. I don't like those people that think they're so smart because they got a college education. So we kind of show our bias that way by projecting what we don't have onto other people and despising it. Or we overcompensate by working hard to achieve something that say, look, I did this. A lack of element is kind of like a square. It creates this tension. So we're constantly trying to relieve that tension by acting it out through another function. Another way is we can pick our friends that have a lot of the element that we don't have, you know? So if I'm lacking air, I may be just love to be around intellectuals and listen to them talking and reasoning and what have you, because I want it so much. I may hate them for it, but I want it so much, and I want to be part of that. So that's another way of compensating. Despising and craving something at the same time that's part of it. Okay. Is there anything I missed now? Oh, I've talked about, we had Freud and Jung, but nobody talks too much about Adler. Adler was more of a social psychologist. He was into psychiatry. He developed the term, the inferiority complex. I'm sure you've all heard that. Oh, she's got an inferiority complex because she feels like she's a loser. She can't do this or she can't do that. But that's what he was saying. Okay. It's similar to having a lack of an element. You feel like inferior about this. So you've got to prove that somehow you do have it by getting some achievement in the outside world for it. Okay.
That makes sense.
I covered everything. Is there anything you want to jump in on here?
Yeah, that's great. So many good things. Yeah. First of all, I recognize that I do. I have low earth. And we were saying I have like one earth, right? And my husband has a lot of earth. And also my best friend is a Capricorn and has earth. So it makes total sense that I have brought in those earth people. And I do think that it's good for astrologers to note, to be careful the way you speak to a client about their child missing an element, or anybody, you're working with missing an element, so that it can be a very sensitive subject for them if they are aware of it. And even if they're not, they might then sort of question what you're saying or what you're doing, right? When that's not really the case. And also, we were talking earlier that I think is a good point about questioning ourselves and our own capabilities. With me lacking earth, it's needing a certain amount of like working really hard, and then we don't see things happening, and then starting to question my ability to actually be capable of achieving or doing the things I want to do. Without that lack of earth, that staying power, I can keep going, but it can feel futile, or like I just can't seem to make those advances. Yeah,
I have the same problem with the lack of air, because I've been a reader since I was a child. My father took me to the library all the time. I started reading very early, and I started writing. And of course, I was using the drama function, but at the same time, I was writing stories. I was writing poetry, stuff like that to express myself. But when I'm working on something that's overwhelming, like I'm working on a book and I've got all this information, that those points that I feel overwhelmed, that's when I go back to my lack and say, oh, maybe I can't do this. Maybe I just don't have the ability to do that. But that tends to go along with it. Okay. It's not true. That's what you have to tell yourself. It's not true. I'm just feeling overwhelmed. So I need to take a break from this and come back to it when I'm feeling better. But don't give in to those negative feelings or those negative questions.
Yeah. And I find myself don't judge yourself, keep going, slow and steady wins the race. Like, take a break if you have to. Like, I definitely, it's a process to learn not to beat yourself up about those things. And that's where taking the negativity out of it, I think, is really important.
Yes.
All right, cool. So let's go into some of, each one and some of the tips and tools for more consciously dealing with it. We've made some notes here on each one. And let's start with the lack of fire. Do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, well, lack of fire, what does that mean? Okay, it means that it has a lot to do with your faith, your optimism. So you need to find that in the outside world. Think about the issues that are related to the three fire signs: Mars, Sagittarius, Leo. Competition, fame, recognition, self-belief, self-recognition, risk-taking, optimism, adventurousness. You have to find that somehow in the outside world. Okay. This is not a conscious component of these qualities. So you'll have to be driven to demonstrate them in the outside world. Okay. When you think of Aries, you think of those risk takers, what do they call those in Hollywood? The stunt workers, or
stunt people, or actually.
Yeah. But there are people that you wouldn't think of as not having fire, like Elvis Presley had no fire. And yet that's what you think of him when you think of him constantly moving and being energetic and singing and dancing and so on. You think of him as being a fire poet, but it's driving him to that recognition of, look at me, I'm a fiery person, I can do all this stuff. You find it in entrepreneurs like, what's his name, Aristotle Onassis that married Jackie Kennedy. He was a real entrepreneur. So all that fire went out into proving himself. Nostradamus, he had no fire in his chart, but he was overwhelmed by visions of the future. So sometimes these people become almost mythic in their lack of fire by demonstrating it in other ways. You find some actors like Sean Connery don't have fire. Sean Connery, what? James Bond, the action-oriented guy, the smooth guy, having no fire, but he certainly demonstrates it as a character on film, doesn't he? And comes across as that personality. Mozart didn't have any fire. Mozart, the great entertainer. I mean, you think about some of the operas that he produced that had so much that are so fiery. One has a dragon in it, for instance. I mean, he was just constantly working hard for that recognition. Of course, he didn't get as much as he should have until later. Another one was Johannes Kepler, who was an astronomer, and he was very interested in figuring out things, demonstrating, I would say, the universe, the beauty of the universe through mathematics. Okay, and that's how he got his recognition. So again, you can think of a lack as kind of like a square, producing this tension inside of you that needs to be relieved by doing something in the outside world. Fire can also become, it comes over as passionate, dogmatic, stuck in a belief system. You could make a great preacher because you'd be preaching out all of this wonderful Aries stuff, or think they're way more sensitive than they are, and they create music or art to express that fiery stuff. Who else? You could express it through your water function, through music or art. Sometimes people don't do it in the outside world. They live through it in their imagination and their dreams. So they dream about them being a great, what was that character? Indiana Jones, the adventurous, constantly going off on an adventure. Or they like to watch movies about people that have all of this stuff. So they dream about it in themselves. Like I dreamed as a kid, I wanted to be a movie star. I lived in the movies. And so you wanted to use that lack of air through drama, and get recognition for that. Yeah.
That makes sense.
That's what it kind of like lack of fire is.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the idea of that square analogy that, great achievements come when we, are pushed, like we want to work really hard, or, it creates that stress or tension and forces to like work through something, but then we can actually achieve great things. So
well, that's why we say a grand trine is kind of lazy. So unless it has a square aspect to it to kind of give it the energy, the tension to move it, we don't use it. We just kind of, it's there and it's fine. And I'm comfortable with it. So I don't have to do anything. You got to have a square.
Like the saying.
Or an opposition.
Yeah. Use it or lose it.
Use it or lose it. Exactly.
Exactly. That's great. Yeah, I totally see that. And you even expressed how, you can overly use that earth function, by being more dogmatic or like a preacher and achieving, success as like a preacher, or getting into that creative side, using it into their water function if they're stronger there. I like how you see where they can actually put that fire into other functions where they're stronger and achieve.
Yes, and that's where you can observe it in your own child. If they have a lack, how are they expressing that lack?
Yes. Yeah.
Are they somehow making friends with a lot of people that have the element they don't have? That's one way of doing it.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's a great observation. Observation is our number one tip, right? Okay, so let's dive into lack of earth. So that leads us to issues around those earth sign characteristics of Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn: money, security, the body, sexuality, food and health, work, practical skills, and professional status and responsibility, which, like we were just talking about me, I definitely have lack of earth. And that's something, money and value and feeling like I'm achieving things is something that I'm always trying to, work towards. But there's real also issues with authority figures or mistrusting authority. At the same time, wanting to be in positions of authority and being, a leader, and in a position of authority. So having that lack often, it's simultaneously despise and crave that, like you were saying before, that, people who have that accomplish those things or are really successful, that you can be turned off and also wanting it at the same time, right? So tell us about some of the examples of the people that you chose here for lack of earth. There's some really good things.
Yeah, that's for instance, Bill Gates, the entrepreneur, he built a financial empire. Okay. He has no earth. Okay. Wow. And what did he do with it? Of course, now he's got all this money he's put in a trust and he's giving some back through charity. So he's accomplishing two things with that earth function.
Yes.
Okay. The naturalist, Charles Darwin, had no earth. And so what was he interested in? Everything earthy, studying different species and how they evolved and things like that. And the famous sculptor, Rodin, the French sculptor, had no earth. But look at the things he created with his hands,
wow.
Building sculptures. You have to give him credit for that.
Yeah.
Also, it can manifest itself through the body because a lot of it has to do with the body. So you'll find it quite often. You'll find athletes, bodybuilders, dancers. They want to express it through the body somehow or other, their lack of earth.
Yeah.
I can't think of anybody else off.
I was a dancer. That's what I did when I was young.
There was a model who had no earth, and she was called the body. So you can see the lack of earth, how it was manifested through her trying to perfect the body.
Wow, that is so cool. So you can work with that lack of earth, by, leaning into that, wanting to reach status and, proving your value to others or feeling you need to reach some status to prove your value, I imagine, right?
Oh, I forgot the most famous one.
What?
Donald Trump has no earth.
That's right.
He had a problem with authority figures. His father was, what do you call it when they're obsessed with business? He was obsessed with business and building. And so what did Trump go into? Was real estate, earth, building big buildings and putting his name on them so they could be seen by everybody who went by. Okay, so that was very important to him. Also, being the type that hangs on to money, likes to make more money. He got very upset if he wasn't recognized on the Forbes 100 richest men. And if he wasn't on that list, that was very upsetting to him. He wanted recognition through that earth.
Well, that makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
That does.
Also being the boss, he liked to have everything done the way he wanted it. So he would delegate to other people to do what he wanted. Yeah. And he liked to do 2 or 3 things going at the same time.
That makes sense. Yeah, because he's a Gemini.
Yes.
Lack of air. Let's talk about lack of air.
That's me, lack of air.
Oh, that's you. Okay. Yeah, you talk about it. It's you.
So we're associated with the signs of Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. What does that mean? Studying, learning, equality, justice, harmony. Libra's harmony, involvement in social and political issues. That's a very Aquarian. And all of those things I was involved in. When air erupts through the unconscious, it can bring some real brilliance and real genius. So you look at philosophers like Bertrand Russell or Descartes, the French mathematician, who were philosophers also, did not have any air, okay? Great writers like Goethe and Tolstoy and Walter Scott, great writers also use that function, that air function, that way. And they're also, you wouldn't believe this, but Albert Einstein didn't have any air.
That's
So he had
crazy.
overcompensate for that. And when he was young, they thought he wasn't too smart, but he was thinking things his own way. And as he got older, a professor asked him why he wasn't doing well in his class. And he said, your stuff is boring. That's why.
And he's a Pisces, I believe.
Yes.
Mhm.
So you can see how that can demonstrate itself. You wouldn't, like my girlfriend, she has a Leo moon, she's a Capricorn, but her Saturn's in Aries, and she has a Leo moon and she has the sun right on the ascendant. So she comes across as this very fiery person. Nobody believes that she's a Capricorn when she says that.
Yeah.
Because, that's just how she comes across with all that fire.
Makes sense. Yeah. So air can produce a passionate drive to communicate, that using that fire function.
That's it. Yeah.
Right. And then strong feelings about relationships or social issues, which is the water function. And then also being obsessed, or having that obsession to prove one's intelligence, right? Or the ability of, getting certain things done, the earth, like, let me show you how smart I am, even though I don't have air, I can know all these things and learn all these things. And
I was lucky that my father promoted that air, because my father was always reading, and he took me to the library very early on and was getting books, and I would sit there and hold my book up like he did and read like he did. So he was encouraging me in that function. I became a constant reader and curious about everything. I tried to use it when I was younger through the drama stuff. Okay. And then as I got older, that means that as you get older, you try out different things. I didn't marry somebody who had a lot of air. It was more like me, Pisces rising. So I didn't use it that way, but you can see how you can use it in different ways at different times in your life if it comes about that way. Why did I become a teacher? That's so air.
Exactly.
Right. And I was a drama teacher. But there wasn't many jobs for a drama teacher, so I was teaching English most of the time.
Yeah.
So you can see, and then I ended up writing a book, so putting all these things in, but at times things would get overwhelming. Look how long it took me to write that book. Was a long time because I wasn't secure enough that I knew enough. And my friend kept telling me over and over, you've got to write this book. There's nothing out there like it. You've got to, so I finally did after I retired. So, but we don't have to wait that long.
Exactly.
You can,
Kid Wheels.
Here's my book. Yes,
Understanding the Natal Chart. And you published this when?
2018.
Yeah. Oh, it's awesome. And I think that's great, Cornelia. You are such a great teacher. You've brought, such a great astrologer. You've brought such wealth of information that is going to be such a big part of your legacy. And
that's the other thing we do is we get degrees. I got 2 master's degrees.
You go. No air. And look at how
is that an overcompensation or not? Yeah.
Yeah. But so accomplished, right? And you're a living, breathing example of the accomplishments that you can achieve without air.
Right.
In your chart. So congratulations. I think it's awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's do lack of water then. So the lack of water can describe someone whose emotional responses can be inappropriate, absent, or even overwhelming because they lack that water. So issues around Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces characteristics, like those feelings of belonging and nurturing, emotional dependence on others, empathy and compassion, and emotional pain. So one can use a fire function by dramatizing and acting out one's feelings, or use the air function to learn theories of emotion and talk about their feelings more than actually feeling them. I have air and
they
water
have a tendency to rationalize everything. Well, I'm feeling this way because,
that's what I do. That's what I do. All my air is in water houses. And I was always rationalizing how I was thinking. And I think that that's part of, dropping into the earth is becoming in my body more, the earth element. Mm-hmm. I'm able to actually feel my feelings as well. So I think part of that, using my earth and really, trying to balance that, is to drop into my body so I can actually feel. Absolutely. So also therapists, you always say there's a lot of therapists who don't have water, but they're using the intellect to rationalize and get into why someone's going through a certain emotional pain or the psychology, right?
Yeah, you look at Freud and Jung. I mean, here's a two great psychoanalysts who had no air in their chart. I think part of that is because they feel the deficit.
You mean water? They had no water in their chart.
They had no water in their chart. Yeah, I'm
Yes.
sorry. It was Einstein didn't have air.
Right.
They don't have any water, so they feel a deficit. So they try to understand by using it knowledge and figuring out why people have feelings and how they have feelings and how it affects them. And so doing research in that area and then sitting down with people and talking to them about their feelings, trying to heal those problems, because they're still inside trying to heal themselves of having that deficit.
Yes.
And that's a good way of doing it. And of course, they got a lot of recognition.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But what happens when you use it, if you use it through water?
Yeah. And you even said can become obsessed with liquid, not just like swimming, but even like drinking, you know?
Oh, even like drinking. Yes,
Yeah.
you can become an alcoholic, but that's not usually the way. I mean, I like Mark Spitz's example, you know, winning all those gold medals, but also musicians. John Lennon didn't have any water.
I imagine there are like a lot of wonderful artists and singers and stuff that you would think, you know, have that creative element of water, but they don't. It could be fire, you know, or earth, even like the Taurus, you know, there's so much creativity in that. So I think that's fascinating that, you know, our association with the different elements in terms of what we think they would produce is not always what they produce. Sometimes it's a lack of that element that produces that thing.
I think also we have to take into consideration the fact that we're always progressing.
Yes.
So I noticed like most of my Cancer planets have progressed into air planets. They're now all in Libra. No wonder I became interested in relationships, and that they're all in the 5th house related to children. So it's manifested itself in different ways when it moves into those different, you know, signs. Now you're in touch with it more.
Wow, what a great part 2 to this talk in terms of the elements through progression, right?
Yes.
We're missing something, but then planets progress over time into that element. We can at that time kind of identify more or feel into that element even more. I think that'd be a really cool talk and research.
Well, my grandson, for instance, he's a Taurus, but temperamentally, he's really air and fire. And so now his son has just progressed into Gemini. So now he can feel more of that air. He's concentrating more on his grades and he's doing more reading and things like that. He's using the air function a lot more than he was.
Right. So ultimately, our natal chart is the core promise, the core energy, and the progressions. Then it's like that's when our chart progresses because the planets keep moving. And then it's like showing us how we can move into the function of that other element to help the imbalance. But ultimately, you're still working all the time with your core natal chart, which may wherever that lack is. So it's but that's a great way of like expressing how we always are evolving and changing and have opportunity to bring in that balance within ourselves.
Yeah, on a more conscious level.
On a more conscious level.
Yeah, because before, remember we talked about the lack being kind of like an unconscious thing.
Yes.
And we project it out there in the world. But if we progress like a sun, which is our ego, into as an adult anyway, move into a new sign, we're going to experience that and feel more comfortable with our air function. And we don't necessarily have to prove it. We just have to express it in that way. Like I became an MSCT, you know, I wanted to work with families and relationships, helping people get together and, solve their problems, that their marital conflicts, whatever. So Libra works out pretty well now. So now it's parent-child relationships. Yeah.
That's great. But I mean, I think
that's the nice thing about being a person. I mean, being a human being, we never stay the same. We have new experiences. We learn new things. Hopefully we're open to change. And so we can connect to that change and use it to our own best interests.
I agree. Absolutely. All the time.
So
This is great.
you're not totally stuck with that native chart.
Exactly. You're born with it, but you have, this is where the choice is. You're always progressing and learning and growing, and the wheel is always turning and progressing, and the energies are shifting. And so we can constantly evolve and grow.
Yes,
So good.
that's what it's all about.
That's
It's
what it's
growing
all
from,
about.
it's starting out with a child, and he's developing a persona that people reflect to him. But as he gets older and moves into the teenage years, he becomes where identity becomes established, where he says, no, I'm not my father. I'm not my mother. I'm who I am. I just was talking to a friend, and she said her daughter said to me, no, I'm not you, or I'm not dad. I'm who I am. I'm an individual person. I thought, well, isn't that great?
Yeah.
To have your own identity. Yes. So it's just
Absolutely.
get away from that persona and find out who you really are. That's a whole journey of life, is learning who you are.
Absolutely. And we're going to dive into relationships next time, I think. So let's
Yeah.
just wrap this up with just, the quick relationship and parenting tips. We've kind of already mentioned them, but we'll just sort of like reiterate that first and foremost, observation is the best medicine. Observe your child's behavior when they're young. They often are going to be manifesting that lack. It's going to be what they're expressing the most is often what they're lacking, and that can be for anyone, your partner or anybody. You're looking for that expression. And then with children, obviously early on, like we are, what we're expressing, they're taking in, their friends, their family, so who are they drawing on that influence? And we had a workshop with a couple of brothers, a mom had a couple of sons who were both lacking elements, right?
Each other's element. One was lacking fire, and the other one was lacking water. And it's then the water child was being overrun by the fire earth child, and the mother was having a hard time, working with them. And I said, well, they're here to teach each other. I said, because your fire earth child has to learn to be sensitive to other people's feelings, and your water child is so sensitive, he learns to be more assertive, so they can learn from each other. And so you can help them by letting them work things out from themselves, to really listen to each other, so they can learn, okay, I can learn about water people from my brother because he's right here. They're sensitive, they cry more, etc. So it's a good learning experience. Absolutely. And you find quite often there's dramatics, okay? And sometimes it works a different way. For instance, if you marry somebody who has all the fire that you lack, okay, they're extrovert and you're more introvert, okay, well, that works out fine because they handle all those social situations that you don't want to be bothered with. But at the same time, that's something you blame people, you project it on people, and then you criticize it. The guy comes home, he doesn't want to socialize, and she's invited people over. Why did you do that? I needed some time by myself. So it becomes a way of blaming the other person rather than recognizing that they're living out these functions in different ways. We have to learn to respect those differences, even having a lack.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. That's another great point about understanding our partner's chart and what they're lacking versus what you are. That's so
exactly
good. It's so good. And then finally, we, explore ways to offer support to help that imbalance, with a child who, lacks air, we take them to the library, right? That's what your father did. Right. And then if your partner lacks fire, maybe they need lots of extra praise, so if you know this, you can see how they might overexpress or be overconfident or feel like they're not good enough. And a little extra praise would go a long way, and to sort of temper some of that and know that they don't have to push. They don't have to, be too fiery or out there, that, they're loved. And
a kid who lacks earth, you can give them stuff to build with, give them a bunch of clay to work with and sculpture and stuff like that, like Rodin, or Legos to build, building buildings. Okay, so there's ways to encourage, let them get the feeling of that element that they're lacking.
Yeah. Oh, this was so great, Cornelia. I love it. All good stuff. All good stuff. Well, thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this talk. And if you have, more questions about this topic or would like Cornelia and I to go a little deeper, submit questions. And we'll do some Q&A talks, or let us know what you'd like us to maybe go a little deeper into. We'd be happy to keep, going. We're going to anyway. We'll be sharing all kinds of other talks and information.
Yeah.
But, stick around, follow, like, subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts or watch your podcast, whether it's on YouTube. And stay tuned for more. We can't wait to bring it to you.
Yes. What are we going to talk about next time? Relationships.
Yep. We're going to be going into relationships.
That's an important topic, right?
Yes.
And what do you look at when you look at relationships? You look at the first seventh house.
Yes.
Okay, you're looking at a polarity. That getting into polarities is really interesting too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So stay tuned for more on that, everyone, and we'll be back for the next one. Bye.
Bye.